If you can take the time to understand these basic yet overlooked principles of communication, then it will just change the way you navigate through life. But the reality is, if you really want deep connections, then how many of you believe that you're living below your potential? One of the things that is huge and one of the most important things to acknowledge is, of all the principles of communication that I teach, the one that gives me the most pushback when we're talking about being a great communicator with other people, I believe with all of my heart, it starts with whether you are a parent, whether you are a leader, whether you are an entrepreneur, whatever it is, the more you work on these principles and the more you practice them, it changes your ability to communicate. And I promise you, it will propel your career. It propels your life to a whole new level of success as you master the ability to communicate.
Welcome to The Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of The Intentional Way. I'm your host, Bryan Hatch. The guest we have today has brought my life more joy. Every time I see him, I feel like I'm oddly home in the conversation. He's just a guy I wish I could spend every day of my life with. That's the kind of guy this guy is. He's a business owner. He's created software. He's created training and consultations and all kinds of fun stuff with Scalable. And he does speaking engagements. I'm going to butcher some of the words here, but the goal is that you may be excited about our guest as I am. We have a guest here with us, Chad Kerby. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Bryan. Wow. That is quite the introduction. It is definitely good to be with you for sure.
Well, first thing, correct me, because sometimes there's so many things that I've seen you do. Where is it that you're focusing most of your energy and effort right now so that people professionally understand why they would want to connect with you? Let's start there, and then I've got some other things I want to get into.
Absolutely. So last year I wrote the book Speak and Get What You Want. And we have a podcast by the same name, Speak and Get What You Want, because everything I do, Bryan, is centered around communication. Because Bryan, you're one of the marketing geniuses out there who understand marketing at a level very few do. And you understand how important messaging is. And so when we talk about Speak and Get What You Want in the podcast and in the book, it's how are you communicating? How are you delivering your message so that you can truly get what you want? And so that's the focus that I have meant for the last several decades. I'm passionate about that, how to help people communicate in a way that makes them achieve their highest level of success.
Thank you for clarifying that for us. And I'm sure we'll get into some of those principles. Oh, I hope we get into some of those principles
Sure.
during our episode today. But I have seen Chad Kerby, for those that are listening, I've seen Chad Kerby transform companies just by the way that he speaks. And so this isn't tongue in cheek. This isn't something that he had to work and figure out. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of effort into it, but Chad just speaks in a way that has people listen. I have never been in a room where Chad's been speaking where not everybody's riveted on the edge of their seats listening to Chad. And I've seen him in multiple different facets that way. And I'm just proud to have you on the show.
It's good to be here.
Well, one of the first things I do want to state out there is I know there are a lot of people that know you. There are people that can find you via the methods that you've just shared, what you do, LinkedIn, social media, that kind of fun stuff. But share with us something maybe out there in left field about Chad Kerby that everybody needs to know. What's something that people should know about you that they don't?
You know what? Obviously, those who know me know that I have 9 kids. And for me, the love for my wife and my kids drives everything I do. And I think that's a lot about what you're talking about, Bryan, when you talk about presenting and capturing people's attention. If your passion is really about others, then it can really help propel you to, a level of greater success. And my passion and drive, all that I do is really rooted in the love for my wife, the love for my kids. And I love those interactions and the people I'm around. I think all of us benefit when we're around the right people. And Bryan, I share those same feelings that, you shared about me towards you. I absolutely love being around you, being energized by you, and learning from you.
Well, it's apparent that you have 9 kids, because if you can get the attention of 9 kids in a family, you can get the attention of anybody in the world, in my opinion. So, maybe those speakers and trainers out there that don't have kids, if they had them, they would become better speakers, because man, to herd in 9 cats, the way I'm putting it, would be a challenge. So congratulations on that, Chad. That's
Well,
awesome.
and they give you immediate feedback as well, which is very helpful, right? So my older kids, Brian, think that I'm super young, and my younger kids think I'm super old, and
Hmm.
so they give me feedback accordingly. So it's
Yeah,
good.
that's good. Well, Chad, I do want to go to maybe the inception. Where did you start learning these skills of engaging speak, like truly engaging? The way that from the day I've met you, obviously you had a life prior to that, you just have a way that engages people. Like it does. I've been in small groups with you. I've been in large conferences with you where you've been on stage, but then in a small huddle of us, 5 or 10 people. And it's literally people can't not listen to you. So where did that come from? How did you get that?
You know, Brian, I was thinking about that very question the other day. It's ironic that you asked that because I was thinking about one of the very first speaking assignments I was ever given. I was a 16-year-old boy at the time, and somebody in my church group approached me and said, Chad, now when you're a 16-year-old boy, think about your thoughts, who you are, what's important to you at 16, right? And a lady in my church group said, Chad, I would love for you to come and speak to 12 and 13-year-old girls. And I was like, oh, okay. What would you like me to talk about? I was totally taken off guard, right? I'm like, why would you want me, this 16-year-old punk, talking to this group of 12, 13-year-old girls? And she said, I'd really like you to talk about perfecting your inner beauty. And what really matters is in the inside. And for me, Brian, I was like, this 16-year-old, I'm like, wait, I'm all about outer beauty at this point in my life, right? I'm not thinking about the inner beauty. But it took me off guard, but two, I really started reflecting back on, okay, what can I talk about? And really at that point was one of the things I really learned about speaking. And that is when you get up in front of a group, what can I say to help those in the audience? And I was thinking about, okay, so here I am going to be speaking to these 12 and 13-year-olds who are probably a little insecure, beat up. What can I say to make their life better? And that theme is really carried throughout my life, Brian, as I think about when I get up in front of a group, I'm always thinking to myself, okay, what can I share to improve their life? What can I share to make them more effective? Too often when people get up in front of a group, they want to talk about me, and they'll say, look, I'm gonna share this, they're gonna think I'm incredible. Well, everyone's favorite subject, as we all know, Brian, is themselves. And so when you get up in front of a group and you're only interested in talking about you and not truly focused on how you can help others, then, as great of a speaker as you might think you are, you certainly won't have any lasting impact.
Your story brings so many questions to my mind. What do you remember any of the bullet points from? I love the fact that you're talking to younger than young women, and you're the one teaching this. So I love the concept, and you're one of maybe 5 people I actually want to meet when you were 16. I want to travel back in time and
No,
meet
you
you at
don't.
16.
No,
Yes,
you
I
don't.
do.
No,
Oh my
you don't.
God.
Brian, I couldn't understand why I was asked. Why was I even invited to do that? But it really did. I mean, here, 35 years later, I still remember the feelings I had. And I also truly remember wanting to figure out what I could say that would improve their life. And in the book and the podcast, we often talk about people falling into the credential trap, which is where you try to spend all this time credentializing yourself rather than really spending time trying to improve the people that you're associating with or speaking to.
Yeah. So on that vein of talking to somebody about something that matters to them, take it from the story to practicality. Like, how do you actually do that in an as-lived basis? Like, you're walking through life, you're going through it, you're at the grocery store, you run into somebody. How would that be triggered as opposed to, Oh yeah, my kids are great, and my kids are this, and my, and me. Like, how do you do it?
Well, Brian, a big mistake that people make is thinking that when someone's asking about you, that they want to hear about you. What they're really thinking about is themselves. And so when you start asking, even when people, they'll say, "Hey, how are you doing?" "Oh, you're good." And then you ask them questions to get them to engage. It's amazing to me, Brian, how willing people are to share and talk, even those, maybe quiet, reserved individuals, if you just ask them questions about themselves. And then when you leave, they think, oh my goodness, he is the best person I've ever been around. Because they're thinking to themselves, I can't believe it. Brian's favorite subject is my favorite subject, me. And so being intentional, and you know what? And I love the title of the podcast, because being intentional about asking other people questions really, it changes everything. It'll change your relationships. I have a family member that, Brian, that they talked about themselves all the time, right? And then the moment I start talking about myself, they would leave. And it frustrated me for many years. I was like, what the heck? They drive me crazy. They drive me crazy. But then once I understood this principle that we've all heard before, everyone's favorite subjects themselves, I was able to harness that. And I'm actually really close to that family member now, because I just understand why they just want to talk about themselves. And I ask him additional questions. And after every conversation, he's like, "Oh my goodness, Chad, it is so great visiting with you." I'm like, "Well, you didn't hear one thing from me." But the connection was made deeper. And so, and it's all about creating those connections. So when you talk about the intentional way, be intentional about making it about other people.
Yeah. So maybe that's the theme. Number one is to hold that intention in your mind of this is going to be about them in some way, shape, or form, so that you could practice. Because I think that's just now your nature, right? This is just how you operate. Most people operate the way you're just describing, where it's like me, and they're not always being mean or selfish. It's just
No,
natural to say, yeah, this, and I'm doing this, and I'm working on that, and my kid's doing this. That's just natural. And when you feed into that, it truly does make a magical conversation. I've
it,
seen that.
absolutely.
Now, you said, though, that with that family member in the past, that it used to bother you. How did you make the shift? How did you make the
Well,
shift from allowing that to bother you to realizing, no, that's just how people are?
Well, it came from years and years of consulting companies, consulting organizations, teaching people how to speak and communicate. And as I start teaching these principles, it all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, that's why. And I completely connected the dots and understood, okay, that's why they're communicating that way. If you can take the time to understand these basic principles of communication, and I say basic, but I should say basic yet overlooked principles of communication, then it will just change the way you navigate through life.
Yeah. Now, when you may have been frustrated in that, I'm just going back to that scenario with this family member. It could be anybody at this point, but
Right.
do you ever feel lonely in the attempt? So let me now zoom into what I see of you. You're always talking about other people and what they care about and what's about them. Do you ever feel like, you know, you do that 99% of your day, and like very few, and I'm not saying your family, but like very few people in the world professionally are going to reciprocate that and actually, well, Chad, tell me about what's happening for you? Or do you just live into like, yeah, it's my life. I'm going to be the 99% about you and 1% about me?
Well, but the reality is, it is truly about me too, Brian, because I'm seeking for connection.
Mm,
And that's what I want. I want connection with people. And people think that the avenue to get connection is to talk all about yourself. But the reality is, if you really want deep connections, then you listen to other people. And listening, Brian, no one listens anymore. It's crazy. If you just listen, so someone comes to me and says, Chad, I want to be a fantastic communicator. I just want to be really good. And I'll say, well, you probably need to listen. And they'll say, no, no, I'm a fantastic listener. Most people really fail in that listening category. I was 8 years ago, Brian, I was speaking at a conference, and the guy before me speaking was a memory specialist. Okay.
Okay.
And so there were about 300 people at the conference. And part of his presentation, he had all 300 people say their names and then he recited all 300 names, right? That's pretty impactful experience, right? And then he said, do you want to know how to become and just really increase your memory and just be exceptional in memorization and understanding? And I was like, yes. And I've got my paper out and I'm ready to write this down. And he goes, listen. And I was like, wait, what? Listen. And he goes, no one listens anymore. He goes, how many times have you walked in a room with 8 people and said, oh, I don't know any of you. What's your names? And everyone recited their names. And you realized you didn't listen to anybody when they were reciting their names. And you're like, oh no, now what do I do? Right. And so taking that time to really be intentional in your listening is so critical.
Okay. So if someone wants to become a better listener, what are some of the methods you teach that would allow them to do that? Because it is about communication, but it's the listening
Right.
first as a first step.
Absolutely. So the first thing, Brian, the very first thing anyone has to do is simply acknowledge the fact that they do need to be better at listening, right? So often we don't even stop and think, am I even listening? We have to, one, we have to acknowledge that, okay, listening is important. And then two, be very intentional about it. And I don't mean to overuse the word that is on this podcast, but you have to be intentional about listening. And then it takes practice. And, John Felkins, one of the top coaches for Dave Ramsey, he was on the podcast and he shared this principle with me that really resonated with me. And he said, 10-pound weights. And he talked about, you don't start, lifting 200-pound weights. He says you start with 10-pound weights. So as you talk about how do I become a better listener, acknowledge the importance of it, then be intentional in listening and start with those 10-pound weights. And when you walk into a room and people are asking or saying their names, stop and go, okay, I actually need to listen to this, and acknowledge those things. And you'll be stunned to see what happens as a result of it.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. Well, to go one layer deeper on that, Chad, you have mentioned the phrase intentional listening in our conversation here a few times. I'm imagining some of our listeners right now thinking, well, what is intentional listening to Chad? I mean, I might have said something previously, but I don't think we've talked about what do you think is intentional listening? Because I think that I know it's on the podcast, but we use that word so many times on this podcast. So let's still define it because I think it's valuable to start there so that we can build upon it. What is intentional listening? It's not just thoughtful listening, or is that what you're, give me what you mean.
Well, years ago, after John Wooden, the great UCLA coach, died, there were people that started sharing stories that they had with John Wooden. And there was one reporter that said he was doing an interview with John Wooden, and this is back in the days pre-cell phone, and his phone rang. And he looked at him like, are you going to go get that? Like, your phone's ringing. And back in the day, for those old enough to remember, it would just ring and ring and ring. And John Wooden was completely focused on this individual. And this reporter said, John, you going to go get your phone? And he goes, no, I'm here with you right now. That person can wait. And I was like, wow, he's very intentional and focused about listening to this conversation. So I would say, Brian, one of the very first things that we all need to be thinking about is what type of distractions are we allowing to come into the conversations we're having? Are we removing those distractions? And so when you say, Chad, what does it mean to be intentional? It means to remove the distractions that are preventing you from having those conversations. And then what's happening, Brian, is because you have those distractions, you don't have the opportunity to connect. And so we are the most connected we've ever been in the history of the world with the least amount of connections because people are distracted.
Yeah, because while you're talking to them, it's the phone comes out or the buzz in the pocket or the something happens. We get, I don't know, how many 300 to 1,000 notifications on our phone a day, depending on how you manage your notifications. And that can cause you to pull out very quickly from any conversation you might be in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the very first thing I would say, Brian, is that we need to manage the distractions that we have in the course of the conversation.
Yeah. All right. So intentional listening is in part removing distractions. Anything else that's relevant to say on this first building block here?
Well, I also just emphasize the point I mentioned a moment ago. Acknowledge the fact that we aren't good at listening. Acknowledge that and understand when you go into conversations, when you're sitting down talking to people, acknowledge the fact that, okay, I probably haven't been very good at listening. I'm going to work on this because the reality is, Brian, is listening, effective listening can be tiring and exhausting, but it is something that you just simply have to work on to get better at.
Yeah. If I can add a little insight, I think it's the second half of the acknowledgement. For me, as I listen to you, if I jump into a conversation and I'm one of two options. If I jump into a conversation and I say, I'm a bad listener,
Mm.
and I go about that conversation, I might continue to be a bad listener. But you said, I'm not a good listener, so let me work on that. And I probably didn't get it exact, but that's what you said. There's still a second half of that. Acknowledge that you're
Huge.
not good and you're willing to work on it in this conversation. Well, that was impactful to me because it's that whole phrase of like, hey, I'm probably going to get distracted, but let's focus and not get distracted or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. But more important is to acknowledge the importance of listening, right?
Yeah.
You got to be careful. And one of the things we talk a lot about in the podcast and the book is how you also speak to yourself. So we do have to be careful to not be too critical of yourself and say, I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm a bad listener. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that, because that's not the reality of it. You have opportunity to be better and you will be better, but it's making that commitment and saying, okay, I am a tremendous listener. I'm a great listener. And how am I going to even get better? And so that's important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I love that you share that because I'm thinking of people that are close family, people in my life where I hear them, I hear that word. Oh, I'm not any good at this. I
Mm,
can't do this. Literally, it feels like nails on a chalkboard for me. I do all that I can to not bring it up because I've found that when I do, it doesn't necessarily help the other person. But it's like when you say I can't or that I can, you're usually right. If you never want to get good at it, okay, I guess, but don't limit yourself. But that's a
right.
personal, rabbit hole I could go down. But I love that you share that.
And Brian, I think some of the times we say those statements so that we don't have to work to be great at them, right? So
Mm,
we just say, oh, I'm not a very good listener. So therefore, I'm not even going to try,
yeah.
right? So
Yep.
we need to live bigger than when I get up in front of a group of people and let's say there's 1,000 people in the audience and I'm up speaking and I say, how many of you believe that you're living below your potential? Brian, every single hand goes up every single time. Every single hand goes up every time. And so it's like, wait a second, then why are we living below our potential? Because we're willing to just say things like, well, I'm not good at that. I'm just not good at that. But you can become phenomenal at it if we're more, focused, intentional, and acknowledge the fact that the opportunity is there for us to get better.
Yeah. All right. So we understand that we've got to connect with people about them,
Mm.
be a good listener. Maybe there's more to share there, but what's next? Like, how do I become a great speaker? That's the premise that you brought
Okay.
up.
Yeah. You know what? One of the things that is huge and one of the most important things to acknowledge is the energy that you bring. And I will often say people match your energy in 3 minutes or less.
Hmm.
Okay. People match your energy in 3 minutes or less. Now, TK, the host of the podcast with me, he would say he sometimes, he says 30 seconds or less, but 3 minutes or less, they match your energy. And what I mean by that is this: when I teach this principle to companies, I'll say, okay, how many of you know somebody that when you're with them, you feel like you can accomplish anything? And everyone's like, yeah, I know that person, right? And then you go, furthermore, how many of you know somebody that when you're with them, you're just like, oh my goodness, I wish the world would end today, And everyone's like, oh, yeah, I know that person as well. And I say, so what do we call that person? And then without fail, someone will say, we call them draining. Isn't that interesting? We call them draining because they literally will drain our energy.
Hmm.
And so you think about matching energy. So I bring that up, Bryan, because what type of energy are you showing up with every day? How are you showing up to a conversation, to a presentation? Bryan, this may sound ridiculous, and it probably is. But before I get up and speak, people always say, Chad, you have such high energy. But before I get up and speak, Bryan, I will go into a room and jump up and down and move my arms in the air to get my adrenaline going. And so that's something I will do so that when I come on stage, people will, they'll match your energy. And people want to feel good. People want to be happy. People want to be optimistic. So if you think about connecting with other people, manage your energy. What kind of energy are you bringing to conversations? When someone says, hey, how's everything going? And it's always terrible and it's always gray skies, all of that. People don't want to match that energy. Now, by the way, Bryan, I'm not suggesting we're fake either,
Yeah.
right? But we need to make sure that we understand the power of that energy. And if anyone listening questions it, go to the grocery store today. And as you're checking out, be happy and be engaging to the cashier and watch what happens. I promise you, they match your energy. It's a pretty powerful principle.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that principle of energy. I don't think that it means that everybody has to be Chad Kerby. I don't think that
No,
everybody has to have pure adrenaline running through their veins when they speak. Now, if you're going to go speak on stage, if you're going to get on camera, there's some things there. But
right.
in real life, you don't have to be just the most energized human being in every conversation. It's more of, I think that what you're getting at least the way I'm receiving what you've said is bring your energy to a place where you're excited about it or happy about it.
Mm,
You could be, there's people in my life that are a little more monotone, but they're still happy people. And it's like, bring the best of you in that and bring some energy to that conversation. It doesn't mean you have to like talk like Bryan up and down and move your hands and all that stuff. You can do it your way, but it's still bring that energy and tone. It's going to make a difference. Now, I would share if you're getting on stage, if you're getting on a video, I had a client a while back that was preparing for video and it's like, all right, and shot a video and sent it to me. And I was like, okay, maybe before you do this, drink a Red Bull or jump around, or because sometimes we think we're bringing energy. And that's the funny thing is like, if you record a conversation with your spouse, okay, let's just say you set a camera up and you go, say, I'm going to bring my energy, like whatever that version of energy, I'm going to bring positive energy to this conversation. And then you do it and then you watch it. You're like, that's like boring.
right.
It's funny how it kind of comes differently. So I'm saying that for the purpose of that it takes practice.
Right.
And everybody's energy doesn't match like the Energizer Bunny, but it does need to be your enthusiasm involved in it, right?
I love that. I love that you bring that up too. And I think a great example of that is perhaps like a Simon Sinek, right? Because
Oh
for
yeah,
those of you that have watched Simon Sinek, he has phenomenal, great energy. But Simon Sinek is not one of those jump up and down,
yeah,
super pumped up type of individuals, right? But his energy is positive, optimistic, and it's just wonderful. And so you can go watch him and go like, okay, because I think it's very, very important that what you just said there, Bryan, is that we're authentic and that we're real to who we are, right? And so
yeah,
that we don't try and pretend to be somebody else. It
yeah,
just doesn't work.
yeah. I love that. There's so many questions around authenticity, but I want to stay focused on our conversation here. So I want to be a great speaker. I want to be a great communicator. What else would you tell me? I know that we're going through a lot of steps, but still, it's the whole pie that comes together in the end. So what else, Chad?
You know what? There's something that is that now this principle that I'm about to share here is something that people may struggle a little bit with. And so I want to make sure that people understand some of the things that we've talked about initially before I introduce this one down principle.
Okay.
But remember, everyone's favorite subjects themselves.
Yep.
It's all about them. And even when you have the right energy, it makes it about uplifting them, right? Because when we have this, oh, my life is so terrible, that Eeyore mentality, we're making it about us, right? And so we want the world to stop and make it about us. But the reality is that the world doesn't work that way. You can be that way, but plan on not being successful. And so what you want to do is just continue to make it about other people. And so this next principle is indicative of that. And what this principle is this, it's called the one down principle, but it also makes it all about us rather than other people. When someone comes up to you and says these two words, thank you, most of the time we reply with, no, thank you, right? Like we make it all about ourselves. So I teach people to eliminate the words thank you. And people, Bryan, when I say, now, by the way, let me preface this. When someone opens the door for you and gives you a glass of water, whatever, of course you say thank you. However, when someone comes up to you and says, oh my goodness, that was such a good presentation, thank you so much, your response is not to say, no, thank you, you came, and because then it makes it all about whom? You. Yeah. If you are in business and someone comes up to you and says, oh my goodness, Bryan, your marketing is incredible, thank you so much, and your response is, no, thank you for paying your bill, right? It became, all of a sudden, it went from it being all about them to being all about you. And let me unpack this a little bit further, because the person who says thank you is the person who won. And when you've helped them win, they say, oh my goodness, Chad, thank you so much for that presentation. My response is always, I'm so glad it was helpful. Go crush it. Keeping it about them rather than turning it to me where I says, hey, no, thank you. I appreciate you laughing and speaking at the right time, right? And so you need to make sure you're keeping it all about them. Now, by the way, this isn't an original thought. There's a fast food chain that has this on lock. Any idea of who that might be, Bryan?
Yeah, I do. There's two that come to my mind.
Well, and Chick-fil-A, you will never get someone at Chick-fil-A to say no, thank you, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yep,
they
that was
make
the
it
one.
all about them, the client, the customer, the entire time. And I know, Bryan, of all the principles of communication that I teach, of all the principles in the book, podcast, and so forth, the one that gives me the most pushback, they'll be like, no, wait, Chad, I have to say thank you. I have to say thank you. And I really want to emphasize, I'm not saying that you eliminate it from somebody opening the door, giving you water, or any of those types of things. But when you've extended value to somebody and their response is, oh my goodness, that insight was so helpful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, this is what I love to do. I've seen companies and organizations completely shift by implementing that principle, Bryan, where someone says, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for your help with my car or whatever it might be. And instead of saying, hey, no, thank you, because of this, I'm going to Hawaii. No, it's, hey, this is what we love to do. It's our pleasure. You're welcome. Whatever it might be, keeping the focus always on the other person.
And their experience. I remember, Chad, when I learned this principle from you years ago, I implemented with my team. In marketing, there's such thing as a thank you page. You go on those pages and you put your name and email, and then you go to a thank you page. I stopped calling them thank you pages. My whole team, I'm like, we do not call them thank you pages. They're confirmation pages. We don't say thank you on that page.
Right.
Because we're providing something. So I love that principle, but it is one that definitely people, it takes them a minute to wrap their mind around. And I think the way that I would maybe reiterate it, that I've been able to hone that a little bit, maybe not as much as you, but you taught me that principle. So it wasn't like I came up with this. It's simply a matter of, if I do good for somebody else, if I provided something useful for them in their life, and they decided to look at that thing, whether it was emotionally or it was actually a physical product, whatever it is, and they're like, man, this has changed my life, or this has helped me, or man, that gave me a leg up, or whatever it was. And then I don't keep it all focused on them, that you're right. It ruins the experience. It ruins the gratitude that they have. And to be able to say, I'm glad that you took that and ran with it. I'm so proud of your effort. Great job. Or you're welcome. Or I'm happy to serve people like you. It definitely makes the experience greater and richer
It
as opposed
does.
to just, and even, dude, I've trained Chat GPT in my business because, you write emails or confirmation emails or whatever. I say, never say thank you at the beginning of my email. If we did something good for somebody, they should be thanking us for the good
Right.
work that we did. And not egotistical. I'm not like, you have to be thankful. It's just like, we don't offer that up. And then that one down mentality, it's actually a mental image that comes to me now when I hear the word thank you in odd contexts. In the right ones, like you said, it's totally kosher. But when when the other person should be thanking you, it's weird. Yeah.
And the more you dive into it, and I love that you've embraced it, Bryan, because it's so true. Because you think about if someone buys your course, okay, and then they get a confirmation that says, "Hey, thank you so much for buying this course. Wow, this is so great." Rather than, "Hey, congratulations on taking the next step," right? And the feeling that if you just take that example, Bryan, the feeling is so different, right? When I bought this course to make me an exceptional Instagram marketer. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm learning how to post on Instagram. I bought this course. Hey, thank you for buying my course. I'm so grateful. Like,
Feels
I hope there are
desperate.
more people, as opposed to, hey, congratulations on taking your Instagram to the next level. We're here to help. Right. And all of a sudden, the feeling is completely and totally different.
Yeah. The thank you in the wrong place actually feels desperate. It actually feels
Right.
wrong. Yeah.
Right? It feels wrong. Like if you think about when you go buy a car, okay, you go buy a car and you found the car and the salesman walked you through the whole experience and you're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for all your help. I love this car. If the salesman turns to you and says, hey, you're welcome. I love watching people drive off on their dream car. You're like, that was awesome. But if he's like, hey, no, thank you, man. Thank you. You're like, wait, what just happened here?
Yeah.
Did I get the best deal possible? And it completely changes the feeling that people have. And that's something that I think really goes unnoticed is how are you making other people feel? We talked about managing the energy, Bryan, but managing the energy in the way they leave after they purchased your goods and services. What's the energy that they feel? Did they feel like it was all about you? Or did they feel like it was all about them the entire time?
Yeah. It's become a telltale sign of someone that's actually right there in the moment with me or someone that is just living default status quo kind of style. So, yeah, very
So
great
true.
tip. And I hope people take it for what it really is and not kick back on it because it's a powerful principle. I want everybody to hear me. And Chad is not saying don't be grateful in your life. That's not what he's saying. There's people that are like, but I have a gratitude journal, Chad. I gotta do this every morning and be grateful. No, that's absolutely sound practice. Be grateful, but use thank you in a different way than you've used it. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting. And part of the challenge is just the English language, right? Like we have words like love. I love my wife. I love pizza. You know what I mean? It's like in a lot of cultures, there's a lot of different languages. There's variations of words. In English, sometimes we have one word that blankets so much. And thank you is one of those things, right? If I'm going to a meeting with somebody that's a client, and they opened the door for me, I'm saying thank you. They gave me a ride. Thank you. They bought me lunch. Thank you. Right? Of course you're saying thank you, but I'm emphasizing that point, like Bryan indicated with the thank you page. It's the congratulation page or whatever it makes sense for your particular business. And when you're speaking and somebody, hands you a glass of water, you say thank you. But when you're done and they come up and say thank you, it's, hey, I love helping people or you're welcome or whatever it is.
Yeah. It would, I mean, even in that scenario, somebody opens the door for you, you say thank you. It would be weird if they said thank you.
Right.
Right?
Right. That's
It's like
perfect. Yes.
like even in the analogy, it's perfectly clear, but people sometimes still rewire it. It's like the door holder wouldn't return and say, well, thank you for being here so I could open the door. It's like, no, I helped you. That's good. Simple.
But healthy communication and effective communication's a lot like healthy living too, right? Because initially it takes some adjustment, but the more you work on these principles and the more you practice them, and as John Felkin said, those 10-pound weights, it changes your ability to communicate. And I promise you, it will propel your career. It propels your life to a whole new level of success as you master the ability to communicate.
Speaking of intentionality, what is your intention for listening to this episode? Are you simply passing the time, or are you here because you truly want to improve something in your life? The way we act is a direct reflection on what matters to us. So right now, while you're here, take a quick moment and rate this episode, or leave a quick comment. Pulling your thoughts into words is powerful, and it turns passive listening into action. When you act on your intention, that's where change happens. Your rating, your comment, your share, they're not just clicks. They're a signal that what we're building together matters, that conversations like this deserve to grow. Each action helps this message reach more people who are looking to live intentionally. And here on YouTube, tapping that like button, commenting below, or sharing this video with someone who matters to you is telling the algorithm that intentionality is worth spreading. It takes just a few seconds, and it creates a bigger ripple effect than you might realize. I created this show because I wanted to help people find their way, find the intentional way. Okay. So we've had a few really good, and I'm not going to pass over them principles because we've talked about each of them. What's the next level, Chad? Like, how do we take this learning that you've given us to the next level and be great communicators?
Well, I think it goes back to a principle you talked about a few minutes ago, Bryan, how are you speaking to yourself? Okay. So we're talking a lot about communication to other people, but I really want to emphasize how you're communicating to yourself. As we mentioned, I have a bunch of kids, but my kids, one of my least favorite things my children will say will be like, Dad, I'm so stupid. Right. And it drives me nuts because I'm like, and I always respond with the same response, which is, that's genetically impossible. And they're like, well, I don't even know what that means. Right. And I'm like, well, you're my kid. How could you be stupid? That doesn't make sense. And you have to be careful what you're saying to yourself. And so when we're talking about being a great communicator with other people, when we're talking about connecting with other people, I believe with all of my heart, it starts with how are you communicating to yourself? And whenever I teach that principle, Bryan, and I'm like, okay, just watch how you talk to yourself over the course of the next 24 hours, people immediately start catching themselves going, oh my goodness, I can't believe I said that. I'm so stupid. I'm terrible at that. Oh man, I'm this. And it's rarely positive. It rarely is positive. And so when you have that belief that, you know what, I am good, I am great at this, too often we discount ourselves, we discount who we are, what the value that we bring to the world. And so in order to justify that, we beat ourselves up. And Bryan, most people, what do you do when you try and give them a compliment? Most people completely discount it. They're like, oh no, I'm not comfortable you saying that I was very good at this or that. And so how are you communicating to yourself? What are you saying to yourself? What positivity are you speaking to yourself?
Yeah. I love the principle. And Chad, maybe bring it into reality. How have you worked on this principle in a way that someone else could look at an experience you've had and say, oh, I could figure out how to do that too? It's great. It's great in theory, but I think that we have so many thoughts that come through our mind on a daily basis, like just hundreds, thousands, whatever they are. We can catch it a percentage of the time, but tell us an experience of how you've done this.
Okay, it's incredible. Honestly, Bryan, when you told me the name of your podcast, I was like, oh my goodness, that is one of the most brilliant names I've ever heard. Because in the intentional way and being intentional, it's stunning to me, Bryan, how often the doors open up when you begin speaking to yourself in a way that's consistent with what you want. And what I mean by that is this, Bryan, I have my Speak and Get What You Want podcast and I love it. But I sat at the beginning of this year and said to myself, you know what? I'm going to go on other people's podcasts. And so I wrote it down. I said, you know what? I'm going to go on this many podcasts this year and not just 3 days later, you and I are on a phone call or on a Zoom call, and you're like, yeah, I have a podcast, and we lined this up. And it's amazing how when you speak things a certain way, they will literally be spoken into existence. And so I've seen it just as recent as you and I connecting here, and it's powerful. And so, but by the way, be careful, because whatever you say, you'll speak into existence. So if you say, I don't have money, I don't have success, I don't have any friends, I can't, whatever it is, you'll speak it into reality. And so for me, that's just one example, just in the recent history, where I've started saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And it happens. The challenge is, Bryan, is when some people get a little bit of opposition, they give up and they're like, oh no. But once you're clear on the destination, you get there.
Yeah. What advice do you give? I'm thinking of a specific person in my life that has self-described challenges. I'm not saying that they aren't real, but I'm also saying that they are speaking some of those things into existence. That, from my perspective, and it's, I want to get inside their brain and rewire some things so they stop saying those things. Not that they're not actually having a rough go at some things. That's fine.
Sure.
What advice do you give that person that, like, they are on a loop and they're like, I can't, I'm not. This always happens. I never do that. I always do this. What's their first step out of that?
The first step out, Bryan, is I would bet anything, not anything, but I would bet a significant amount of money. And I
Not
don't
all
bet.
your 9 kids.
No. And
one or two of them.
let me use a different phrase here. I would almost guarantee that this individual has a very cloudy vision of where they're headed. When people aren't clear in their destination, meaning this is what I want to go and accomplish. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. Those individuals that don't have that kind of clarity. Now, the reason why I say that, Bryan, is because 99.9% of people right now are living opportunistically, not strategically. Most people, when I get up in front of groups of people, Bryan, I'll say, how many of you, there's only two ways to live, Bryan. There's only two: strategically and opportunistically. That's it. Strategically is saying, this is where I'm going. Opportunistic is just being, I'm just out here floating. Well, what do you hope 2025 looks like? What do you hope 2026? What do you hope they look like? Good. What do you mean? Well, I hope they're good. Well, what do you want to accomplish? Good stuff. That's how most people live. And then when they start floating, so just use the example, they're a raft out in the ocean with no motor, they're not rowing, there's no direction, and they're just sitting there and they're like, oh, this is terrible. Nothing's going the way I wanted it to go, right? You've heard that phrase before. People saying, nothing's going the way I want it to go. Which way do you want it to go? Go somewhere good, right? Well, I hope I just land on a beautiful island somewhere. Where's the island? I don't know. I just hope it turns out good.
Any one of these ways.
Yeah, any one of these ways. And so what I would say to that individual is, where do you want to be 3 years from now? I would say 10, but 10 is just too far that's just a lot to consume for someone who may be struggling. Where do you want to be 3 years from now? Well, 3 years from now, I mean, I think I would, what? No, what do you mean? Why? Well, I don't know. And then you dial back to 1 year. And when people get clear, then they can make it through it. Let me give you an example, just real quick. I used to live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was driving my family to Disneyland. And it was our first trip to Disneyland. And I think the oldest child, we only had, I think, 6 kids at the time. And so we loaded up and we're driving to Disneyland. Why are we driving? Because we had 6 kids at the time, right? And so there's 8 of us and we're packed in the minivan and we're driving. And as you're driving from Salt Lake City, Utah to Disneyland, you pass a city called Barstow. Now, with all due respect to anyone who may be listening, living in Barstow,
I have a friend from Barstow.
I'm sure it's a very lovely community, right? But it is very hot, and it's not, from the highway, there's not a lot of beautiful things to see. when we were driving to Disneyland and we painted the picture to the kids, right? And we're like, this is where we're going. When we got stuck in Barstow, they're just like, wait, what are we doing? Well, we're on our way to Disneyland. This doesn't look like Disneyland. It's hot. I don't see very many pretty things. No making, no, but we're on our way. We were clear where we were going. And even though we got stuck in Barstow for a moment, we weren't in despair, Brian, because we knew we were headed to Disneyland. We were clear in our destination. Too often people get stuck in the Barstows of their lives and they don't have the destination of Disneyland to pull them through. And so then they sit back and they just complain about Barstow, and they complain about how hot it is, and they complain that it's not very pretty. They complain, but that complaining goes away when you're clear to where you're headed. And so that's the very first question I ask someone who has a struggle communicating to themselves and they're critical of themselves. I'll say, well, what do you want to be? What do you want to accomplish? And the more clarity they get around that, then they can push through those Barstows of their lives. With all
And
due
I think
respect to Barstow.
I'll call my friend and tell him that you didn't like Barstow.
No, no.
He doesn't live there either. I don't know, but it's all good. Either way, I think the principle is beautiful. And sometimes when it comes to communication, when it comes to things like this that are maybe floating in our lives, that, the word communication is big. You can work on it. Can you not? All these things that's kind of out there. But everywhere else in your life that you look at, that there's a destination that's clear to you. If you want to run a marathon, that's the end. There's got to be checkpoints along the way to make that happen. If you want to look a certain way, if you want to drive a certain thing, if you want to, there's so many really easy examples that I can pull right now that make that principle really clear.
Right.
And yet sometimes when it's like a relationship with somebody else, or somebody I love, or somebody I want to marry, or somebody, there's all these things that could be happening. Those feel floaty. They feel different. And I'm inviting our listeners to maybe see them like you're seeing them, that it's actually, if you know the destination, then you can actually match that. And the challenges, the down times, the rough times may not be so catastrophic. They might still hurt. I'm not saying things don't hurt, but if you still know where you want to be and you're working towards it, then hopefully it won't keep you in the mud.
Right. It's exactly right. That is exactly right. I love that. So insightful and absolutely true.
Well, Chad, you've taught us just so much. I don't know that someone that's thinking about, I want to be a better communicator, could have learned all of these things without listening to you. And I'm grateful that you're here. Is there anything else that someone needs to make sure that is a part of them becoming great communicators? I mean, I'm thinking of people in my life that I want them to be better communicators. And I'm like, okay, what else, Chad? What else can they learn? What else can I learn so that, we actually can do it?
Well, I think one thing, and we can just, as a parting comment here, Brian, is that if we replace the word communication with connection and think that what we're truly, the goal of communication is actually just to connect and deepen that connection. And then once we have that connection, we can help, guide, and direct. And so whether you are a parent, whether you are a leader, whether you are an entrepreneur, whatever it is, you're saying, I want to be a better communicator. In essence, what you're saying is, I want to be better at connecting. I want to be better at connecting. And the power of that connection is real. So as you think about, okay, how do I improve my communication skills? All that we've discussed today will contribute tremendously to you improving those communication skills. But the end goal is to be a better connector. And by the way, just so everyone knows, with our increase in AI and technology and in the world that we currently live in, people now more than ever are desperately seeking connection. And they're desperately seeking human connection. And people will think, well, what about AI? At the end of the day, people still want human connection. And also, might I add, we're getting less effective at it, Brian. And so I love that we're able to cover some of these things so that we can improve our communication, so that we can improve our ability to connect, and make our lives more successful as we improve the lives of those around us. So, love it.
You did it right here, Chad. You allowed us to think of communicating, and you made it clear that's actually connection. You just did what you taught us in a matter of seconds here at the end, that if we're focused on the connection, then communicating is a necessary part,
Right.
right? Okay, then I will do the things. I will figure out the what and why and how, listening to what advice you've given us here. But the actual true outcome, the destination, like you said at Disneyland, the destination is connecting. And I want people to let that sink in. As I heard Chad say that, the first time I ever heard you say that, that's powerful. That's super powerful, because what matters most in a conversation, the conversations that anybody listening has ever had in their life, where you left feeling better than you started, or like that conversation actually made a difference for me. We have many of these. Some people are introverted, some people are extroverted. So maybe you have more or less, but either way, you have conversations, which is a part of communicating. And now if it's actually connected you to the person, it was meaningful and it meant something.
Right.
And that's a beautiful piece. So I hope that people are connecting that like I am, because I think it's a beautiful way to explain it. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's just good. It's good being with you, Bryan. I enjoyed this time we spent together.
Chad, it is always a pleasure to be in your presence. I say that very sincerely. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. We will make sure people have a way to connect with you as they listen. We're going to share all the ways they can connect with you afterwards in the notes. So if you're still listening, go check them out. You can connect with Chad, learn a little more about how he can help you with your connecting skills. So thank you so much for being here, Chad.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.